Welcome to Surel's Place. I'm Jody Eichelberger, the program director here. We are thrilled to have you joining us for this virtual reading with our writer-in-residence, Don Dorland. But before we get to that program, I just wanted to share a little bit about Surel's Place, the building, and Surel's Place, the entity, as well as the district, because I know for some of you, this might be your first time joining us for a program. So I'm actually going to take you down the street, and our program tonight is happening in a different location. That'll become clearer once you see where it is that we're going to do the event. So here we have the house, and we have a lot of different functions here. We do the residency where the artist lives, but we also have community events. Usually there's a workshop in the middle of the month, as well as a final event like we're doing tonight toward the end of the residency. But it's not just the house, it's also the whole district. This area in 2011 was named the Surel Mitchell Live, Work, Create District. There's a lot of interesting things in proposals right now. In fact, this property right here, you see there's a tiny house right there, but actually there's this other design that is proposed for this called Park 33. And that kind of activity is happening all over the neighborhood. One of the features that makes it really interesting is you are allowed to have commercial zoning as well as residential zoning. And so the idea with the Live, Work, Create district is that an artist can live and work here. One of the programs that we offer is First Friday, which is an art walk that many artists participate in, and we'll try to fill these different streets. This is used to be a granite and stone company. Now it's becoming an engineering firm. So the neighborhood is rapidly transitioning. On this next corner, we have what first was a church, and then it became an electrical unions training center, and now it's an improv hall. Next to it is a CrossFit place. And we like to use all of this energy to host these different events. Now, right up here on the top of this signpost, you'll see how we kind of do the placemaking here for the Surel Mitchell Live, Work, Create Street. Here we are in the corner of Clay and 33rd. That's the idea behind it, is that people can live here, work here, and create here. Now we have all different artists apply to be residents. We've had clowns, we've had dancers, musicians, writers, all different styles. Surel Mitchell herself was a visual artist, a painter, and her father emigrated here from Poland, and he really enjoyed painting in Garden City, which is why she came in 1999 with the idea to build her home here and create a space that she could paint and have events. She actually became involved herself in the Garden City planning and zoning, as well as the first Arts Commission. And so that energy is continuing today. And the place that we're moving is Studio 1212. It's also called Spaceport. And kind of a funny story about that name actually is that it was like a United Parcel Service sign or something like that, that they then figured out what they could spell with Spaceport. And now we're going to meet Executive Director Greg Hahn, who's going to introduce our artist for today. And you'll start to realize later why it is exactly that we're here. And, well, hi, Greg.
Well, hello. Funny to meet you guys.
Yeah, here we are. We're right in front of these Spartan trailers.
That's right. You know, Dawn Dorland, who you're going to meet in a sec, she's a pretty amazing writer. She lives in Los Angeles with her 3-year-old and her husband. And she went to college there. She went to college right outside of D.C. at the University of Maryland for graduate school. She lived in Boston for many years. She went to the Harvard Divinity School, right? So big city cred established. But the reason we're here is because of where she started. And then she grew up in rural. Boy, it sounds like I just ran here, doesn't it?
It does. You're so excited that you're just out of breath.
She grew up in rural Iowa, trailer park living on assistance, in a very different world. And as we know today, and that's what we're here to talk about after her reading, is these two worlds that we live in, right? This urban world and this rural world, and how different we seem to have become politically, culturally, the music we choose and everything. But when you're folks who I grew up in small town Midwest and live in Boise now, I'm really excited to talk to her some more after the reading, to really dive into where she sees those similarities, where she sees those differences. But I think you're going to love it. And
Econoline is the work that she's reading from?
It's her first novel. Econoline is based in this rural Iowa world. I think in a little made-up town, but but I'm sure it rings true for a lot of folks who kind of grew up in that space or have been around it. So she's been working on this for a few years, and I'm excited to hear from it.
Yeah, me too. We've put her in a different trailer.
That's right.
Let's go find her. I feel like I'm doing an HGTV show.
Good evening and welcome to Garden City, Idaho. I'm Dawn Dorland. I'm a novelist here from Los Angeles in residence at Surel's Place. And before we get started, I'd like to thank you so much for attending, and also special thanks to the Idaho Humanities Council for supporting my reading tonight. I'm so grateful. Just a warning before I get going, what I've worked on here is a voice-driven work of fiction, and the characters do speak very passionately and salty in their own voices. So some of the language might not be appropriate for young listeners or sensitive listeners, but it may be delightful to some of you. And one other thing is that there is a character in the novel who likes to butt into the narrative. And so if you see me looking a little possessed, it's because I'm trying to convey to you that another narrator is speaking. And now I'll get started. Thank you. Econoline. I'm starting at the beginning, so we'll just dive right in. Our mother had always raised dogs, frantic outside dogs roped to stakes, making crop circles of the narrow lawn, 15 by 70. The lot rent will go up, I had heard my father warn. All this happened before you is the reason you got born. No number of righteous speeches from animal control. No frequency of Bob Barker's plea to help control the pet population could persuade Mom to spare neuter. She loved the bitches best when they mothered their own. Dogs that favored each other like cousins, which is how I learned that word. Dad didn't have siblings. Aunt Roz was a lesbian. Mom's cherished younger brother, Uncle Juddy, who'd never turn 18, was dead, dead, dead. Tufted shepherd ears, raccoon masks, dark saddles, dew claws flopping like loose thumbs. These features worked their way through the gene pool, Mom explained, pointing, tracing the lineages in our dog sty. Our dogs were long-snouted leaners, barkers and whiners, fur just lighter than the dirt the dogs stood on. Dogs we named Alf, Punky Brewster, Mr. Eyelashes, Corncob, Captain Claus. Their digging, shitting, and feral sparring drew complaints in the trailer court and threats of eviction. On weekends when our bitches were in pup, Dad drove litters to the Humane Society in the van. I rode behind him in the seatless cargo of our snub-nosed, glass-cracked Ford Econoline, blue as a tidy bowl tablet, bumbling on the highway, bulky and off-kilter like a June bug in the wind. Litters of cousins wet a cardboard box, earlier a case of commodities. Dad's word for the government flour, canned juice and beans, the ruler-long bricks of lard. The pups we surrendered were downy, blue-eyed, and fat, wafting their warm skin and milk, puppy breath. They'd have grown wild with affection in the yard, heaving into our shins, knocking us to the dirt. A puppy is strong just in front of its owner's house, Mom always said. Dad assured me the dogs would be saved at the shelter. Mom assured me they'd be killed. I hated when they confused me like that. The van hummed with highway. Pups punched with their noses, backed into corners, bore teeth through their gums. Little thorns. When we veer off the highway and park at the Humane Society, Dad tells me to stay in the van. That very same cargo where I was conceived on a box spring mattress, the story goes. Now, when I see what you got born into, my brother, it's through that sideways fork in our van's cracked windshield, beyond the four corners of that sliding plug door where I am told to stay. American steel frames my memory. Like a Polaroid, I shake the past, wait for an image to cohere. I am 5 when I first see Dad cross a tar-patched parking lot over seams of dandelions to surrender Mom's dogs. Parked and with the plug door open, I watch Dad walk the former box of beans across the parking lot to the shelter. His thin arms, toned from slaughter, struggle with the peat-in box. A paw slips through. 1 or 2 females I know Mom has stashed away, like us. A bitch is carrying at home, like us, Dinah, she always said. In weeks we'd be back in this parking lot, wavy with heat, with another litter and a new government box. For years like this, we'll avoid eviction. Dad will whine about the nuisance fees increasing our lot rent. Then gradually, maybe all at once, I was only a child, I cannot say. The problem of Mom's multiplying mutts got worse. Our dogs curled like trays of sugar buns in the winter. In summer, they frogged their bellies onto the dirt. Dogs that chased the shade, milling near our trailer as the sun climbed, then pressing to the neighbor's vinyl skirting after noon. They tripped pans of water, skittering their chains, dug grave-like gashes in the yard, and guarded their dishes like infantry. Dad's word for the black flag, Palomia soldiers lost to him in Vietnam. Prisoners of war missing in action, he explained, when we passed a pickup with its black barbed wire flag ripping in the wind. Our mother tended to her pack daily, rubbing knuckles inside their waxy, knobbly ears, wearing her ruffled rodeo blouse, singing her songs to be staged someday, perching dog snouts in her hands. So patient for Mom's ministrations, her dogs quieted when she entered their sty, parting like a crowd before Mother Teresa. Their houses had shingles and sat on foundation like planks, which Mom pried up and hosed off while shoveling the shit and backfilling the lawn when the landlord Boyd Truman issued his threat. 2. The 24 trailers of Boyd Truman's King of Kings estates were squared off from town. 1 side highway, 1 side grain elevator, 2 sides corn. A Midwestern moat, Mom called it. Intersecting streets within the ring road, signed across on Truman's property. Just visible from heaven, Mom liked to say. With 24 mailboxes where we lived at its crossroads, marked Rural Route 1. As for maintaining the borderlands of his shoebox lots, Boyd never told Mom to do it, and he never told her to stop. She knotted her bandana, sharpened her sigh, and went whacking at the prairie mimosa, tick clover, and coneflowers thickening the turn row between the trailers and the corn. All sweet hay, blisters, and sun. Schools of bunnies, chipmunks, and butterflies exploded on her path. A mischief of mice, they say, an unkindness of ravens. Seed fields spent their first months as rising waves of green. Then the stalks tufted midsummer, and detasseling crews mohawked the crop, plucking and chucking in rows of 4. Razorfield, hold on to your dish gloves. Corn ordered the plains, undulating to the vanishing point in the horizon as if to the ends of the earth, with only the blip of a barn and outbuildings in the landlord's white 2-story house. Mom liked to see that she was strong. She often flexed her biceps at me. But as she felled Truman's tough grasses, she wanted others to know her strength, Boyd Truman most of all. Every dog, Mom always said, knows the length of its rope. Once he'd filed an eviction warning at the sheriff's, the landlord served us the notice himself, halting at our mailboxes in his stop sign red Buick Park Avenue, pocked and gravel-dusted from rambling county roads and farm lanes, filmy, like a tongue. I hear him sigh the engine off. Mom tells me to hush. And soon Boyd's trying the knob, which we always keep locked. He raps, craning and peering from the steps into our closest, sliding school bus window, where just below inside I squat in shadow, holding my breath. Mom tiptoes towards me from the kitchen, alerting to the knock. She tilts an ear to the door. Just a thread of light between closed hinges sees the water on her brow. Mom avoids Boyd's face, now filling our God's eye, that diamond-shaped cutout in the door. She strains to hear him state his business from the stoop, but whatever he says is drowned out by dog shouts and slapping chains, choked with the yard's rising dust. The landlord tapes his orange notice to the God's eye in the door before scuffling down the steps my father crafted from raw 2x4s. Back at the Buick, Boyd hasn't even turned his key when Mom busts open our door and stomps into the yard, a sledgehammer on her shoulder. Pissed me all the way off. As good a time as any to sink and straighten her packed stakes, making me wonder which one of them is the dog, Mom or the landlord, and who holds the rope. I follow Mom outside and from our stoop see Boyd's face floating at the crossroads above his Buick's open door, 1 foot out of his car, one hand resting on its window felt. The landlord blinks at the work of Mom's hammer in the yard, metal on metal. From that distance on the asphalt, Boyd winces as Mom makes sparks fly, until he regroups and calls out, "Amber, how are you?" "Doing any better, I'd be scared," Mom hollers, swinging like John Henry. Each slam of her sledgehammer into those stainless steel stakes shivers the flimsy honeycomb wire ringing our dog's sty, her every contact with that hammer sending up flatulent dust. The cowgirl fringe on her forearms swings. Dad is at work, and now the landlord stands on our stamp of gravel where we park the van. He is two-faced like any farmer. When Boyd pulls his seed cap to fold and worry in his hands, he shines a forehead as pale and peach-fuzzed as a child's over a scorched hand throat that's rutted like a boot. Facing our yard, hat in his hands, the landlord winces into the late, low sun. "Now see, you've been served," Boyd says, raising his voice over the barking dogs. "That there's a warning," he yells, shaking his hand-curled hat at the orange slip behind me, clinging to our door now like a smell. The neighbor's window slams, wobbling her blinds. "Been saying for the longest," Boyd goes. "All you gotta do is cut these in half. You can keep half, you know that. But this ain't legal. It stinks. I had too many complaints. And when it rains here with all them dugouts, it lakes." Boyd's tongue, between sentences, tosses a toothpick around his mouth. Mom touches her hammer to the earth and rests her heel on its head. "That's rich, Boyd," she calls from the sty. "Coming here to beak off to me, we're law-abiding. You got over 10 dogs here," Boyd says. "I seen it with my own." "Don't you come here and tell me different," Mom continues. "Money don't buy morals, Webster will tell you that. All the rest? Sounds like your problem. Now hang on a second once." Boyd steps off the gravel onto our long butter knife of lawn, wary but appeasing. The landlord's slight hunchback flushes his neck and shrugs his shoulders more every year. "Am, I told you the truth on this. I told you, 100% down the road." "What you told me is you're here to pump up your gonads," Mom says, and Boyd halts, dropping his head, searching the ground. "That's right, sucker on that for a while." An atmosphere passes between our mother and the landlord that none of my watching and puzzling from the stoop explains. I've never felt right about Boyd Truman since 2 summers back, when he popped his Buick's trunk and showed me a pack of corkscrew pig inseminators he keeps in his car. When Boyd let me take one, I brought that white, crooked wand to show and tell and brandished it for the entire 1st grade. 2 years later, I am still notorious. The landlord and swine husbandry are forever linked in my mind. "Can see you're stronger than horse piss on it," Boyd says to Mom eventually. "But I want to help, I do. That's why I filed a warning with the county first. And now you got 30 days. Oh, gee, thank God! Such a good human, man. What'd I do without ya?" Mom gives Boyd her back and goes to her dogs. Judy Bloom, Rambo, Reagan, Mr. T. A crush of raised snouts, wagging tails, and gentle nips to draw her affection. I'm skipping ahead a little. Mom shouts over her shoulder, "See you later, Boyd." Lowering himself into the Buick, the landlord says, "Okay, you too." 3. I hear Mom tell Dad about our eviction warning that night at the shift change. Says they're going to rip us root and branch, Randy. Iowa notice to quit within 30 days to remedy the violation described as too many months. I'm going to skip ahead to the end of the notice. The landlord has dressed up the notice himself with blue highlighter and magic marker. What makes it serious is that the sheriff has signed Bill when everyone knows him as Wilkie. Nobody bother us on a farm, Mom tells Dad in the kitchen as he's rubbing his eyes, frowning over the eviction warning on the counter. Ain't illegal to raise dogs on a farm, Randy. Mom smacks the formica and Dad jumps. Ain't a word and I ain't gonna say it, I whisper. My teacher, Mrs. Ball, is famous for saying this at school, where no adult but the lunch ladies and the janitor says ain't like Mom and Dad do. 15th's a Saturday, Dad mutters. Would they? On a Saturday? Having thought about it for a while since discovering our trailer's umbilicus, its hitch, I now ask Mom if we can't yank our steel skirting, extend the landing gear, and bid our 6 stacks of cinder blocks goodbye. It is, after all, a mobile home, as Boyd's sign at the mouth of the King of Kings highway entrance declares, though I have never seen our trailer move. And I do find it hard to imagine the Golden West TM Classic Narrow Extra Long vehicle number A988IL now trailing its wasp nests, itchy pink pipe insulations, and electric veins down the highway. Mom looks at me queerly when I ask about the possibility of moving our trailer. The load you can't carry, she always said, you put down carefully. What if we haul out and drive off, leaving no address, I say. Never have any address again. I reel with possibilities, motion for motion's sake, thriving without roots like moss on stone. But when Mom finally speaks, it's another pronouncement. Only place this trailer's going, Dinah? Demo in the dump. What Mom says doesn't even explain anything, but makes me feel stupid and shushed. Then Mom bitches to Dad about Connie, our new neighbor in the double-wide next door, who has surely complained about us to the landlord to get us evicted, who calls us eyesores. Connie will open her kitchen window when I'm in the yard alone, holding her nose. She annoys me, always asking if she can borrow some of our white trash bags. When she knows by now, I tell her every time, we only buy big black ones. Connie's ample lot boasts a vinyl carport, stinky marigolds along a flagstone path, and a split-log front deck under a retractable awning. Our own landscaping is a line of bald, trampled grass between the driveway and the door. Mom objects to Connie's fussy pride, calls her a maniac. Salt doesn't brag, it's salted, she always said. Thrusting her middle fingers crossed in our neighbor's direction, now Mom says, yeah, well, fuck Connie, and fuck her fucking double fucking wide. F, Dad chides on elbows at the counter. He's slumping under our imitation Pizza Hut lamp, ribboned with flypaper and all those dead raisins snared in caramelized glue. Come on, effin', he says. I know what he's up to, Mom goes. Boyd once manufactured homes and trondos, clear the rest of us off, sell wide lots, keep his capacity and septic costs down. Less maintenance, less wear and tear, more time for him to farm. Literally less shit. Dad sags onto his forearms under the Pizza Hut light, still wearing his hairnet and mesh apron from his meat shift. His shift at the meat plant, Aggie Star. I'm confused why Mom's talking about Boyd's plans for the trailer court when isn't the problem our dogs? I'm not 100% stupid, Mom goes. I'm not 200% stupid. I'm not stupid at all. The blind can see what he's up to. 5 years and it's all trondominiums. Is a pig just the same as a hog, Mom? I ask, realizing what Bob Barker might have us do now to help control the pet population. Pigs are fed, hogs are slaughtered. Why? Mom's brows slide together. Like spay's the same as neuter? Bob Barker speaks the terms interchangeably into his skinny microphone as winning contestant families pogo and throw themselves onto Price is Right bedroom sets and cars. What? Did you say? After I nursed you boob to cup. I feel my face fall. I have no idea what spay and neuter actually mean, how it works. Even the question is obscene, so sincere is Mom's love for her dogs. Boyd wouldn't take no more money? Dad asks. Gee, why didn't I ask? What money would that be, Randy? Oh, you're really up to neck shit now. Mom slits her eyes. Don't you dare change the subject to protect her. And you. Mom leans over the lip of the Formica where I'm flattening myself. Think you could do better? What are you, 9? Don't like it here? Name anything you need we haven't given you, Mom yells. Try doorstepping someone else. See where you're at. Mom bursts into tears. Sniffling, Mom lifts Dad's mesh apron from his neck, clawing his clavicles, wafting the safety garment's stink of blood iron. She hooks the apron over her head, patting chainmail over the tops and sides of her breasts. I'll ask for my old job, she says. Mom snatches Dad's hairnet from his head. His black hair wings free, dropping to his denim collar. Mom often carps about earning higher wages, wielding her knife on the meat line, than Dad does doing the work he prefers, fowl prep, patting stunned chickens on their bellies, pegging them to conveyor belts that slit their necks. They pull shifts together off and on during the school year, but Mom's competition makes Dad uncomfortable. Neither of them can stand the cat calls. Show me the ox that thinks the field, Mom always said. It'll have to be nights, Mom goes. You'll have to stop crying, Dad says. Not crying. Mom wipes wrists across her cheeks. My eyes just had a quick leak. You can hear a piece of dust drop as Dad blocks Mom's way, not that she couldn't just mow him over. Okay, Senor Drama, Mom says when Dad steps aside. Her dogs erupt as Mom opens the door onto summer's half-dark. The van's engine squeals, headlights bathe the lot, and she's gone. I had not meant to challenge her, but perhaps as early as then I understood how some people will always take your wanting to know, to understand anything, as a challenge. Mom gone, I kneel next to Dad where he's settled in his toad green recliner in front of the TV. I ask him for $1 to buy a pizza bread. The Come and Go across the highway sells them in revolving, heat-lit cases. Night has settled on the yard and in the trailer, but Dad doesn't turn on any lights. From the carpet, I look up to him on my knees. The TV flickers in grayscale on his lenses. My father wore wire rims like a teacher or John Lennon, smeared with animal fats. Dad switches on the Remington that he keeps in an upholstered pocket on the chair. By the light of the TV and by feel, he gives himself a dry shave. Circular blades whir over the dips and levels of Dad's face as the Remington vents its odor of singed hair and slight electrical burning. Dad doesn't answer about the $1. I'm not sure that he's heard. He stows the shaver and then, instead of returning his arm to the recliner, places his palm on my head. We watched some of Roseanne like that. My eyes blink against the brush ends of my bangs. Dad clears his throat whenever the studio audience laughs. Don't celebrate, he'll whisper, if I ever run in giddy and breathless from riding bikes with friends. Don't savor, he will insist, grabbing my arm. Don't glory in anything. They'll take it from you. I will wrap a potato in foil. I need to start the oven. I need an hour. But I find I don't want to move from under Dad's hand. Roughened with calluses, his thumb web stiffened to a plastic where his knife locks in. Mom won't let him touch her in the nylon dressing gown because he'll snag it with his bare hands, clumsy, thick, and numb to all feeling like gloves he wears over his real ones. My mouth waters for a pizza bread in a paper boat. A baked potato with butter, chipped from the white and wax-wrapped government brick. I kneel under Dad's hand, my stomach grabs, and yet I do not move. The weight of it feels right and rare, even if I know he isn't really touching me and that I cannot reach him. 4. Our indoor dog was a dachshund named Jimmy Carter. In labor, the bitch's long belly distended, buckeye brown, between her thummy legs. Mom prepared a low box emptied of commodities, lined with our soft-stained t-shirts and her old lace bras. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. She counted swollen teats to predict the litter size. I knew Mom had delivered hogs on her father's farm, which I had never seen and she had never visited. There was a shred of a story about my grandfather once slamming his son-in-law against a wall. "Your dad was always the burr up someone's ass, Dinah," Mom liked to say. The bitch dropped yolks for each pup, limbs folded, chins tucked, still slick and amniotic, until the Hund horseshoed her spine to nip and eat the milky sacks that would smother the dogs. The last pup gave Carter trouble. The bitch dragged herself between box corners, making desperate donkey sounds. Mom knotted her hair and wedged her fingers into the birth canal. "Dinah, go away," as she stretched and swept the dog's cervix and synchronized her own breath, panting with the dog, prying an unconscious grip from the pup trying to emerge. The bitch's eyes bulged in their eyeliner lids. The backs of Mom's ears reddened with effort as the dachshund's womb lapped and stiffened like a bull snake, eating eggs. When Carter's dam finally gave way, the pup slid out on a sponge of placenta and a gust of mown grass. Mom netted the afterbirds in an old underwire, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and left to bury them under the doghouses in the yard. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead to the final passage. How I wished our mother would share her women's secrets with me. A notch from understanding, I felt ready to know. Mom's childhood photographs, dirty farm kids trapped in black and white, lived in a fat windowed envelope under a fragile rubber band. "You look like my people," Mom always said. Cowlicks, piggy noses, pinhole and pancake freckles, paunchy knees. These features worked their way through the gene pool. "There's your Uncle Judd," Mom would say, snatching any scallop edge picture from the deck. And let's see. Dead, dead, dead. As I scrutinized the photographs for some explanation or event to unlock all of Mom's mystery and pain. Thank you. That's the end of my reading, and so we're going to take a pause and in a few minutes gather for some more conversation. Thank you so much for listening.
Dawn, that was beautiful. Thank you so
much for listening.
I mean, yeah, we really enjoyed being here. The setting is kind of fun and interesting, and you know, and now, and I, like I said in the preview, I kind of grew up in small town Midwest too, so I feel like I've got a lot to share. But I've been in Idaho for 20 some years, and there are some similarities. There are some differences. There are, of course, lots of similarities, you know, in everyone else's mind between Idaho and Iowa, and we'll talk more about that in a second. But first, I just want to ask you.
The same place?
Yeah, right? Yeah, that's right. Well, so is Indiana. I always say I grew up in Indiana. I moved to college, and then I moved here, and everybody just assumes I moved.
You have
home.
more consonants.
That's right. That's true. It's not quite the same.
It's all in the vowels.
Yes. Dawn, you will be sorry to know that there was singing in the written version of that chapter, but Dawn didn't do the singing.
Away.
All right. So, first of all, tell us about your time at Surel. So, Surel's place, as you saw in the preview, is just a few blocks that way.
Yeah.
You've been here almost a full month.
Yeah. Oh, what a month. So many things have happened while I'm here, artistically and socially. The CDC mask guidance was dropped, so it's been I've been emerging here as a writer and as a person with a face, and I've gotten my vaccinations here. I have my next one scheduled on Saturday. Everyone around me is vaccinated, for your information. And as a writer, it's been I felt so embraced by you all. So I want to thank Jody, and I want to thank you, Greg, and Marnie behind the camera, and Winston, who's part of the Mitchell family, and behind all of this. And especially want to thank the neighbors, because you all neighbors who abut the property, you've all struck exactly the right tone. From Lou showing up, reading me poems, and Erica Jo and Kalyani next door with a cute dog, and now a lizard. And I just feel like I've gotten to know everyone. I've felt very embraced. And I became a writer in part because I love people so much. And so that is a struggle for me, because I love community and being connected, and I love small places where everyone really, where you share an intimacy with people just by proximity, I would say, and because of low density. And so I've done residencies where I've really let myself be drawn into local culture And it's a little bit of a fight because I have a toddler, and so I'm really trying to get a lot of work done in a residency, and there's always a lot of pressure to produce. But I try to remind myself that these little seeds that are planted in interactions bloom into something later. I was telling Greg, when I was in Nebraska City, I visited a Civil War museum, and I visited literally a site on the Underground Railroad, and those have all been germinating with me for future work. And the same thing happened here with Lou yesterday, just in a conversation with the neighbor. Something he said got me thinking about something that's maybe in this book. So, long way of saying that as a writer, I love people, and so I'm always drawn to make new connections, but then want to go back to my work. But that really, at the end of the day, it's all feeding the work.
Okay. Well, your work has sort of evolved too. I mean, like we said at the beginning, you have an MFA in writing, but you also have a degree from Harvard Divinity School, which I assume was religious oriented.
It's called Theological Studies, the degree, and it's a scholarly study of religion. But I chose to go to Divinity School because many students there are actually what I call first-person people of faith. And when I was growing up, I was a person of faith. I was Christian, and I really appreciate religious people, and I really wanted to be in community with them. But I was studying religion as a scholar.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And then what brought you from that? What was the transition then? How did you start easing into I guess nonfiction probably, and then to fiction?
Well,
right?
It wasn't an easeful transition. Yeah. It was like stepping on rakes. But long story short, I decided not to be on the academic track and bailed on academia. And I had been a student for so long and had come from so little means that I was very hungry, and I couldn't really provide for myself. So I experimented with making money. And first I followed an urge, which was to learn more about flowers. And I got a job at a flower shop, and then I got hired out of the flower shop after going to a party at this visual effects boutique. I got hired up as their receptionist, and so for about 5 years I crashed through the ad industry and went from receptionist to executive, and like I said, experimented with making money. But I realized at some point, I guess when I was in my late 20s, that I didn't have a kid yet. I was only responsible for feeding and clothing myself, and that I really needed to do work of meaning. And some of that relates to, I've learned, more recently, to my childhood trauma. And I've learned recently, or realized recently, by studying with Dorothy Allison, who's a big influence of mine, who's given so much of us permission to write abuse stories and stories of poverty. The search for meaning, I think, is actually really intimately connected to an experience of trauma, because trauma is very dislocating, and it separates you from meaning making. And so I wrapped up my experiment with making money and decided to do work of meaning as a writer, and totally re-credentialed myself by going back to school.
Making money's overrated. I tried it for a while. Speaking of Dorothy Allison, I had her in my notes here.
Oh, good.
Because one of the things, and it was hard to see for folks who watch the reading, because you're reading it, it feels very natural, but the language you're using, the written word is dialect in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm, and that's, that's where I had, from Twain to Bastard out of Carolina. It's been such an important part of, I think, this sort of American experience, but it's a tricky one.
That's a good spectrum.
Because you can very easily make somebody, it can seem stereotypical, it can seem, it can seem like you're trying to, that you're implying intelligence through their syntax as opposed to, so I think I just was curious.
That the syntax is limiting their intelligence.
Exactly, yeah. It's like, here's a Southern hick person, I'm going to put a hick accent on it so that'll let the reader know they're dumb. Whereas that is not, to kind of walk through that space when you're creating it.
Not my approach.
No, I don't, I think, So how, it's still kind of a gutsy piece to decide, okay, I'm not going to let people imagine what this is. I'm going to show them what that feels like.
Yeah, well, since it's a residency, I think I can speak transparently about this being work in progress. But the dialects emerged actually recently, and it has to do with really wanting to be able to give to the reader an experience of how I hear something. And so I think in these pre-market stages, before I have like an editor or an agent tell me, this won't work. I'm going to really try to do it right, because you can only write dialogue phonetically or try to approximate a dialect if you nail it. And I haven't nailed it yet, and I was able to cheat because you all weren't reading the words on the page. But what I'm aiming for is to let the syntax of the sentences say more than just changing the spellings of the words. And yet, I don't at this stage in my process want to stifle my instincts as a writer, because we can only write the book. We are best purposed as writers writing only the book we can write. The book only we can write. Sorry, I got there eventually. To write the book only we can write, which to me means not to worry in an inhibiting way at this stage of my project into what I should and shouldn't do. But I know what you mean, because when I give my work to readers, these latest iterations that are very vernacular or in a dialect, I noticed from peer readers coming up as fiction writers, there's a little bit of worry that comes across people's faces, and what I take from that is they're asking, am I allowed to do it? And for now, I'm going to give myself permission to do it as an artistic choice and an aesthetic choice. But about your concerns, I do think that while I really want to give you readers a sense of how I remember hearing people speak, and the kind of it's a heightened dialect, it's an artistically rendered and aesthetically rendered dialect, so it's dialogue. It's not meant to perfectly recreate verbatim written speech. What we're doing in fiction is creating a heightened reality so that it breaks through the page. And I think where I really want to guide myself is to make sure that when people speak with some kind of expertise and when they speak from their dignity, then there can't be any condescension in that. And so especially when people are having agency over each other, I think that's my lodestar in terms of trying to make the right choices. But still very much a work in progress. But those are the things I'm thinking about.
Right? Do you think they look at you funny, these readers, because you don't have that accent? You're like, I'm from here, but you don't talk like that. My wife says the Hoosier comes out after 2 beers.
Right.
But up until that moment, it's not. And did you have an accent? Did you think you spoke more Iowayan at one point, and then LA and Boston and fanciness have sort of beat it out of you, or
yes,
or did you do it intentionally?
Well, I went to college in Los Angeles, and I got shamed out of saying pop immediately. That didn't go on for very long, but that's still there inside of me, and that has to come out in the novel. Right. And it's a very I'd have to tell a little bit more of my life story to kind of communicate to you why I didn't actually have that accent. But it all comes back to issues of class, which my writing is deeply motivated by, powered by. And it has to do with my dad not being from Iowa, my dad being from actually a relatively wealthy family, and him, because of his makeup, kind of having economically a backslide, and us being literally members of the Mayflower Society, but living in trailers we didn't own. And so my father's, this gets into the inheritance of voice, which is also a big theme in my book, the way that the voices we lived with as children become part of our interior. And I know we talked about this New York Times dialect map where you can take a quiz and parts of the map will light up with heat, with red, where your dialect hits. And when you do that, if you're someone who has parents who are from different parts of the U.S., you may be really shocked to find that there's things in your mouth that came from your grandparents, from places you never lived. Mine really hit around Utah. And my father's mother is originally a Mormon, she would say pioneer. So it's a very, your accent and your dialect and whether you mesh in your community or not has so much to do with your outsiderness or your belonging. And just to put it very simply, I was an outsider in our town, and that's one of the things.
Right.
That made me an outsider in the town, but also an outsider in terms of being poor because we were educated. My father was very educated. So in a way, I'm speaking as an outsider to everybody, even the people I'm trying to put in my books. There was something that made me different than them.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating, because I have kind of a similar, Dad was the first person in his family to finished junior high, and but my mom's mom had a college degree, right? So it's like these two sides, and I think it's changed, and then creates a comfort level in small towns and in cities and in conservative circles and in liberal circles. And I think that's the subtext, obviously, of everything now rural, right? Is what does that mean in terms of who we are as a country? And I think I wrote that in that introduction that was online for you. We're seeing two worlds right now. Do you think? And I was thinking before knowing this level of detail that there's some, if you can live in a small town and grow up and then move to a city, you start to do that. But to really see it, you almost need these two sides of the world kind of coming together in your family lineage. Do you think that plays a role in how you interact with folks kind of wherever you end up, I guess?
Yeah, you're putting what I said a different way, but they're both true, which is that Another part of my biography that's really important is that you read an essay of mine I wrote where I was literally in 6 schools by 4th grade. So I was the prototypical new girl. I have extroversion, but who knows if that was innate in me? It was certainly part of nurture, if not nature. Maybe I'm an extroverted introvert, by way of circumstance. But what I'm trying to say is that these early life experiences give you tools to either be a chameleon who adapts and tries to belong. But in my experience, that's that idea is very fleeting, and there's no floor in it. The belonging can be ripped out from under you very suddenly. And that gives you an ability to move between groups, and that's been certainly true in my life. But I also, I'm tempted to borrow the language of immigrant communities, of code switching. And this gets to some ideas I'm beginning to have about these classifications in our culture, about rural and urban. I think they're becoming potentially part of class, because the reason I go there is because one of the things I really want to write against, especially as a white writer, is to write against the harmful conflations that we make as Americans about race and class. I just, in my experience, I find people very innocently, quote unquote, or innocuously making assumptions based on how you present racially about your resources. And that hurts everybody. That hurts people of color who are not struggling on the poverty line, and it hurts white people who are. And it just keeps us all judging one another as stereotypes. And in literature, that has to be dispensed with right away. And so now I'm starting to wonder if these layers of rural and urban that we are engaged in as a culture and politically have that same harmful conflation and are loaded with those same harmful stereotypes, and that's what's creating the division that is becoming harder and harder to ignore. And what I mean by that is that I think we in the cities make assumptions about rural areas, about their access to culture or lack thereof. Maybe if there's a college, in a college town, you would make a mental exception. I'm just trying to pull out the stereotypes we might not even be aware of or might not want to admit. But also, I think there are income levels associated with rural and urban. But of course, we all know that there's poor and rich people in both places. And also racially, since when are farmers white? Since when are people who live in low density areas just white? I think because of the political situation, we've used a shorthand that is very damaging to all communities. And when I write in a way, because I deeply care about putting the place I'm from on the page, I also have to do it justice to honor the people who are there, who are in the 1% of diversity, of racial diversity. Yes, around elections, especially around the Iowa caucuses, we hear all the time about how white Iowa is. But that does such a disservice. So what if it's fewer than 10%? Those people, their lives, people of color in those areas, their lives matter. And to not acknowledge them, to literally whitewash, does them their lives and their existence a real disservice. And so that's why I envision a book about a trailer court in rural Iowa in the 80s and 90s as a place of burgeoning diversity.
That's fascinating. Well, the last question will be about Idaho and Iowa, but did you, and then the essay that you sent me, which is really great and talks about this janitor from your school who would leave the doors open and let you.
Oh, John Rose.
Yeah, which is really sweet. And it kind of is it's sort of both a kid who was dying to get out of there and someone who still, a handful of years later, feels a really strong connection to the place and the people. And obviously, going back there mentally every day as you're working on the book, there's sort of a reverse flight in the process of a novel written from, Los Angeles about the trailer park you grew up in.
Yeah.
How does that, do you think your relationship with the space has changed over the years?
It definitely has, and I was really provoked by this question, or this category of question, because it's still in flux. And you're very kind to say it's only a handful of years ago. It was actually over 20 years ago. We won't do the math, but it's like 2 decades now. And it's complicated because I was a real outcast in our town, and there's something about it that intellectually doesn't make any sense to me. And that is that we have in our country a myth or an ethos or an origin story of the American dream that is happening less and less now, but that every generation out-earns the generation that came before. And yet, I lived in a lot of small towns, but from 4th grade to high school, I was in one town called Woodward, part of the Woodward Granger Community School District. A lot of the towns are consolidated in Iowa because they're so small. And because of a lack of racial diversity, even at that age, I was very aware of class differences, really being the in and out groups. And I endured such stigma. And it was because of how people saw me based on how they saw my parents. And that outsiderness manifested in pretty brutal bullying. And I referenced earlier thinking you belong and having the belonging taken out from under you. That happened. Like, girls are cruel, really cruel. And I struggled to have friendships. I was a jazz musician, and I did a lot of things outside of the district. So I did end up having kind of like a misfit group of friends, or rather, not to cast any judgment on them, but people I pulled from all, like, I called them random nights. So I just pulled people from, like, one trombone guy, one art guy, one student council guy, and women too, meet at the Perkins. Like, that was the way I rolled. And
this is a fancy town if you had a Perkins. Now I'm impressed.
That's in Des Moines.
Oh, okay.
No, that was not in Woodward. No. But to think about where I am today, we're all connected now again through Facebook. I mean, none of us could have predicted that, right?
Right.
And so many of my homies are here tonight, and it's so interesting to me. And I'm getting like very metaphorical or meta-narrative here, but that's my job. That here I was, a child, pushed to the outside, pushed to the margins. And then I skipped a stage. When I was in high school, I felt really embraced and supported by my community, but mostly by adults, like mostly by teachers. And I was not really integrated socially into my peer network, because smart kids are really annoying, right? So that was part of my issue. But now I feel so buoyed by the people I developed with in small town Iowa. And now I almost feel like people are coming to me and asking me to say something to show them something of themselves. And that is such a vital path to be on as a writer. And so in the end, I have to really appreciate that journey and that change. That's kind of where I think it's going. That's how I feel right now about it. It was such a provocative question for me. And I want to make clear that we didn't talk about how much of the book is fictionalized, but it is very fictionalized because I'm writing a memoir, so I can't poach from my own life. I mean, there wouldn't be 2 books. And I have thoughts about that. That's the right position to take as a writer. The earlier you can do it as a writer, the better, because you're making fictional choices that serve the story, and that actually gives you the means to connect to something in your writing that's outside yourself, and it's not just a projection of you onto these marionettes you walk around. And that's what I'm after. But I want to be clear that I will, in the novel, dramatize the emotional truth of my experience, and that has a lot to do with being an outcast. And it has a lot to do the same way that a child still craves the love of a parent who's abusing them. I still, and this girl in the novel, Dinah, will still seek people's care. And she won't always get it. But it's not a judgment on the town. And I don't feel like I'm writing a revenge because of where we all are now, and because I feel supported by the people I incubated with.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great. Well, and I did promise the Idaho-Iowa question. Do you feel home here? Do you think, can you not believe that people confuse these two places after you've spent some time here?
Well, I felt so validated when I spoke to the neighbors and I started making my lame joke I made up, which is that I'm from the other land that starts with I and has 3 vowels. I'm here, my potato people, right? And so I said to them, I said, my whole life, whenever I say I'm from Iowa, people ask if that's where they grow potatoes, and I say, no, corn. And then my neighbor Joe said, oh yeah, everyone thinks, they say, oh, Idaho's that in the Midwest? And so I realized, oh man, he's got his own battle scars, both sides of the I divide here. That's why we're all now in community together.
That's right, we hate everybody else.
The other thing, they've done it to us, because the other thing I want to point out is I was listening to a podcast, and there's a thing that Americans do when they're reaching for somewhere random, and it happened to me in college, in Scripps College, at Scripps College in Claremont, California. I had a professor who goes, yeah, that'd be like some woman in Iowa. And I was like, I'm from Iowa.
That's me.
And I heard on a podcast this week, I heard someone do the same thing and reach for Idaho. And man, I felt for you guys.
We get it a lot. Boise shows up. It's not Peoria. Peoria, I would say Peoria, Illinois has got to be the single-handed,
but they have
single most use of it does if it plays in Peoria, right? But Boise shows up.
Suburban.
And Boise's a big city, right? And everyone's like, yeah, we're treated like the end. Well, Dawn, thank you so much for being here and for sitting here in this space that Jody really rightfully chose. Really, it was a delight. And for drinking Miller High Lifes with me here at the end. I want to thank everybody who tried to watch us live, and hopefully you'll catch this now. Thanks to the Idaho Humanities Council. They were a big help in supporting this and supporting bringing Dawn's voice to you all. And hopefully we'll reach a lot of people and stay connected to Surel's Place. We've got a great slate of artists coming starting in July, and really one after the other, just an amazing group of people. So I think it's going to be really exciting. So thanks a lot.
Something really quick.
Yeah, do it.
That it has been so touching. I know Winston Mitchell is here. I feel like being in Surel's space, you get this precious gift of intimacy with her, because you've seen how many books I've pulled off the shelf. And they're her paperbacks, some of them are from the 70s or 80s. Like I'm reading a first edition paperback of The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. It has that great memory smell with the yellow pages. And I feel so intimately connected with Surel because when I open the books, I see the inscriptions. They're all it seems like they're all given to her by friends. I just get this sense, I picked up the Cowboy Buddha novel, and there's a letter in there which I haven't read, but she's just talking about how they're art friends, and I can just tell Surel was such an amazing person, and her self-portrait in ceramic oversees the entire premises like a benevolent art god. And she's just beaming at you wearing, I think, her own glasses, just willing you to succeed. And so every artist, I just want to tell you how blessed you're going to be to come here. And it's really my favorite residency I've ever done. Awesome. But thanks to all the other places that have supported me as well. This residency comes at a really great time in my life as a writer and in the life of the book. And I can't thank you enough for supporting Econoline.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Cheers.